Hey everyone, Palazzo Guitars here, the hopeless guitar enthusiast with you once again, and it's fall, and you know what that means. It's officially the Halloween season. Yeah, that's right, we don't celebrate this stupid little holiday for just one day anymore. We gotta stretch it out for months. Now, the Halloween season now begins in about mid-August. This runs until about early November. This now overlaps with the holiday season, which begins in about mid-October and lasts to about mid-December, before most of the actual religious observations begin. This means there's a brief 2-week period where all your beloved Christmas classics are competing with the Monster Mash and generic remakes of Thriller for your department store music. When the Halloween season begins, there's still several weeks of like 90-degree weather, and it's still hot for like another 2 months. You might be having a special gathering, and you might need some backyard supplies, maybe a few new lawn chairs, some mosquito repellent, some supplies for the grill. So you drive over to the local big box store, and you head over into the outdoor department, but all of that stuff has been cleared out because they've got to sell you 20-foot tall animatronic Frankensteins. Now this makes a ton of sense. I mean, why would I want to go when the weather's still 87 degrees to buy backyard supplies when I should be spending $1,800 on Halloween decorations? After all, shame on me. I should have gotten all my backyard supplies at the beginning of the summer shopping season, which starts in about mid-February. The truth is, Halloween decorations have not only matched, but probably surpassed that of the craziness of holiday decorating. It's just more of the proof that they're taking God out of everything! But that's a topic for another channel. It's probably not uncommon for many houses in your neighborhood to spend hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of dollars turning their front yard into a slightly humorous graveyard. Now, this is also the time of year when the Spirit of Halloween store sets up shop in your local abandoned Bed Bath & Beyond location. Though I had someone on the street raving to me that Bed Bath & Beyond was going to make a huge comeback and I should put all my stock in the Bed Bath & Beyond and I was going to be a millionaire. I'll have to look more into that. But the Spirit of Halloween is the store where you go and spend $80 on a costume that costs 3 cents to make and lasts about 6 hours. They sell children's costumes. You know, kids, probably the only ones who really should be celebrating this holiday. But they also sell costumes for adults. You know, costumes for fully grown, mature people. Now, the women's costumes are very simple. They all feature maybe a TV or a cartoon character or an everyday profession, but they precede it by the word sexy, and it usually features a very short dress or skirt and prominent cleavage. In fact, around this time of year, the ladies are really clever at turning anything, practically any object, into something very scantily clad. Now, the guys' costumes, on the other hand, also take normal, everyday, respectable professions, but they precede it by the word naughty, and it usually has a fake boner poking up through it. And that's just the problem. People in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and even 50s seem to have commandeered this simply innocent children's holiday all for themselves. It seems like people are always looking for an excuse to dress up in a costume, go out in public, get super hammered, show their true colors, and really make an ass of themselves. Folks, you don't need a costume to do this. I'm living proof. Just ask any bartender within a 25-mile radius of my house. I remember when Halloween was for kids. That's when the parents would take their replicons and dress them up in their favorite sports or superhero or Disney character, parade them around school, we exchange candy, and then at night you go out with your friends and you trick or treat till they stopped answering the door or your parents told you had to come home. But is it just me, or does it just seem like there's hardly any trick-or-treaters anymore? It might be because they have these new laws where they only let the kids trick-or-treat from like 3 to 3:45 in the afternoon. Every single year, the same thing happens. I end up with a huge mound of candy, and it has to be disposed of properly. But I don't think it's just me that notices the drop-off. Just look at this article published in the Palazzo Guitars Picayune. It discusses the steady decline of trick-or-treating throughout the past several decades. And look at this research. According to this graph, trick-or-treating has been down every single year, while there has been an enormous rise in violent crime. Are the two correlated? Well, I'm not sure, but it's something that I feel strongly about. In fact, I might start a foundation that combats these issues. If you also feel concerned about these very issues, feel free to send me money and I'll make sure it gets distributed to the right causes. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, after all, America is just so dangerous. I remember even when I was a kid, we had to check over all our candy for syringe holes because bad guys were injecting dope into all of them. And I can't tell you how many times I found a full razor blade in my Snickers bar. And on top of that, almost as worse was those 2 or 3 houses that gave out those pamphlets that told you you were going to hell for celebrating the Halloween. Can't eat those. This was a real shame because it was always a really great memory of mine from childhood. And when all the kids come by trick-or-treating with their parents, it gives me a great opportunity to check out the super hot moms in the neighborhood. Some of you might be saying right now, Nick, you're just saying this because you're a jaded middle-aged loner and you can't experience the joys of parenthood and see all these things happening firsthand. Well, to that I say, maybe you're correct, but then I wouldn't have gotten to say all that great stuff I just said. Now, despite all this, the Halloween season marks the return of the greatest thing about it. The return of pumpkin spice! Yes, we live in an age of pumpkin spice everything. Now, I remember when I was a kid, I loved pumpkin pie, and even when I was like 8 years old, I said to myself, if I only could take the flavor of this pumpkin pie and incorporate it into other products. Boy, little me would be proud because we live in the golden age. We've got pumpkin donuts, pumpkin muffins, pumpkin loaf, pumpkin pancakes, pumpkin spice lattes, pumpkin spice coffee creamer, pumpkin spice hot chocolate, pumpkin cookies, pumpkin candy, pumpkin peeps, pumpkins, smashing pumpkins, pumpkin spice protein bars, and my favorite, pumpkin spice hamburger buns with black dyed sesame seeds. Get them while you can, folks. But alas, I still walk into Target and I see items on the shelf that are neither pumpkin spice flavored or scented. I mean, where is my pumpkin spice toothpaste? Actually, that's an item you can buy too. But you didn't click on this video to hear me ranting and raving about the Halloween season. Oh no, you came here for some hot guitar building action. Because after all, fall is prime time for guitar building, especially my favorite part, finishing. The milder temperatures and lower humidity create the perfect environment for spraying lacquer. And for this 2-bit fly-by-night garage dwelling guitar finisher who doesn't have a climate-controlled spray booth, I really need to take advantage of this time of the year for the great spraying weather. But almost by coincidence, the guitar that I'm going to be building today is going to be sort of inadvertently Halloween themed. Well, kind of inadvertently, you know, this is social media and we love our themed content. Now, the exact guitar that I'm building never did exist, but it may very well could have. It's inspired by a very dark period in guitar manufacturing, where one company was working hard on revitalizing their image while at the same time trying to kill off the monster that they had become. Now, this is going to be based on a real guitar model and an oddball finish that did exist. However, it was very short-lived. Now, from what I can tell, this guitar model was never ever finished in this rare custom color. However, this guitar technically wasn't available for sale at the same time, but many speculate that one of these guitars could exist. Many heavy-breathing guitar nerds such as myself and people in guitar forums across the world have been trying to find this guitar. It's a mystery that I've been trying to solve for years now. But until we can actually find one, I'm setting out to build my own version of it. I guess I'm creating a new genre of guitar fantasy fiction. So go grab yourself a pumpkin spice latte, a $60 bag of mini chocolate bars, check them for syringe holes, sit back and relax. Enough of me yapping. Let's boogie. Or like boogie, like boo, like Halloween, like scary shit. Peanuts. So when I began purchasing parts to assemble this build, I could not find a body with the specifications that I was looking for already available on the current market, at least at a halfway decent price. So I had this made by Warmoth, and it ended up being a very, very nice guitar. And on top of that, it came out to only 4.3 pounds, which is fairly lightweight for this body style. And on top of it, it's a one-piece body, which is not something that I asked for. This body, as ordered, was $280 from Warmoth, and I did order a matching pickguard, which was $35, factor in tax and shipping, and the initial order total was $367.50. Peanuts. Ah, God. So there's about $1,200 worth of necks right there. I'm insane, guys. Oh, my dad and his friends are, who's buying these guitars? How much you making? What you making? Nothing. I make them for myself, asshole. You make a business out of this? I don't give a f***. I'm making them because they need to be made before I die. How about that? You can see I have a little bit of a attitude about some stuff. Oh boy. Well, they are packed well, I'll give them that. Starting to see neck. All right, let's see what we got. There you go. There's my name. If you do, congratulations, you got fret spout. Very careful. All right, looking good so far. Very, very, very expensive neck. It's a Jazzmaster CBS era, and that looks nice. That looks a lot like the one that's on my American Vintage. This one's got a Fat C, a 90 to 99 profile Fat C binding, black dots. So this would have been early 66 until they discontinued the model. And then it's got the larger CBS headstock. And these are reamed for 10 millimeter. This neck was made by Music Craft in New Jersey, who I feel is the best name in the game as far as third-party neck builders go. And you can see I spared no expense on the features on this neck, but I had to do this because you cannot buy this neck off the shelf pre-made. You have to get them custom made to meet the specifications that I was looking for. Now, this neck cost a whopping $520, and you factor in the shipping, that's $532.66 for this order, bringing the project total already to $900. Yes, I could buy probably a really good used Vintera or something of the like, or a couple Squire Vintage Vibe Jazzmasters at that price. Please feel free to roast me in the comments. The very first thing I'm going to do here is actually just make some tracings of all the body routes. This is to make templates so I can cut out shielding and grounding plates for all the control cavities later on in the build when we're wiring it up. And you also notice in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a timer. I was just very curious, how many actual labor hours do I put into one of these builds? So we're going to be checking in on the elapsed time throughout this video. There was a little bit of a scrape on the back of the body, but not a big deal. That's an easy fix. We're just going to take a damp cloth with some warm water, dampen the spot, apply heat from a soldering iron very, very carefully. And then once that wood kind of expands and swells back up, we can just hit it with some sandpaper, and that gouge goes away, and it looks like it was not even there. It's pretty much indistinguishable. So now we're going to begin the actual build process, and that starts with grain filling. As mentioned before, this is a body made from one-piece swamp ash wood, or as one of my friends refers to it, swamp ass wood. I'm using this color tone water-based filler from StewMac. This is a powder that you mix with warm water, and then you can mix it to any consistency that you'd like. I usually do somewhere between like a sour cream to a creamy peanut butter consistency. The first application I apply with a paintbrush, spreading in all directions, trying to make sure that all those pores get filled. Then once it starts to set up, then I scrape it off with a card at a 45-degree angle, trying my best not to pull any of that filler back out of the pores. And then I will reuse that scraped filler and usually apply by hand to some of the harder to fill areas like the contours and the cutaway areas. And then you can always reconstitute it with some warm water, add more of the powder, and mix it to the consistency that you'd like. I usually find that you have to apply 2 to 3 passes of filler to get a completely level surface. This is because the water-based filler tends to shrink back a bit, and especially after you start applying some of that finish, you start to see those pores poke through. So 2 to 3 passes of this filler really to get it completely level. So once the filler has dried for a couple hours, you want to sand it back. I've got some 320 grit here, and you'll notice that I'm wearing a mask. You always want to try to protect yourself during these builds. Protect your skin, protect your lungs, and you can see I'm doing this in my basement. I probably should have some kind of dust collection or do it outside, because there is dust flying all over the air if you notice in the video. So please keep that in mind when you do this kind of work. Now, it's kind of hard to judge, how much you need to take off on this. That's why you want to try to scrape off as much while it's still wet, because this stuff is very, very difficult to sand once it's dry. So some of the areas like on the sides, the rims there, got caked up, and you got to sand a while. But regardless, this will probably need a second coating anyways to get it completely level. Next, I'm going to apply a 3-part decontamination process. I do this to all the raw wood before I apply any finish. First up is just a coat of naphtha. This helps remove any kind of residues or waxes that might be on the surface. Then I follow that up with a light wash of mineral spirits. This is going to help remove any silicone. Then I will follow that up with just a tiny bit of ammonia in warm water, and this helps remove any of the remaining mineral spirits and solvents that are in the wood and helps clean any remaining waxes and silicone that might be on there. Once that last decontamination part dries, that water is going to cause the wood to fur up just a bit, so I'm just taking some 320, very lightly sanding over the whole instrument just to knock that down a bit and make sure it's nice and smooth and prepped for finishing. And if you notice, we're about an hour of actual labor time into this project so far. So even though I know this is not very exciting to watch, I wanted you to know that guitar building is not just all sex, drugs, and rock and roll, even though that's also important. It's also janitorial work. So every time I set up the garage for finishing, I've got to sweep and vacuum and mop the floor to kind of settle all the dust that's in the air, then set up my knockdown spray booth, the fans, the lights, filter into the fan, everything. So I have to do this every single time to set up for a spray day and tear it down and clean up at the end of the night. Not going to show this every time, but this is what I kind of go through, the ritual I have to do every single day that I spray in my garage. And my dream, of course, is to build a permanent spray booth in the back of my garage. That's what I'm planning on doing. I'm just trying to get all the pieces lined up for that, but that is the ultimate goal.
Praising it for its 20th century concept of the duty the state accepts as a principle of government that 1,000 Chicago Public Library employees continue to stay in Jackson. And Leon's satin facing 100% all wool gabardine side field during the Southwest Pacific Opera House. Senator Douglas acknowledging Ingrid Bergman announced Friday she will divorce her husband, Dr. Peter Lindstrom. She has also said she will quit the movies. Sources close to the actress reported she intends to marry Italian director Roberto Rossellini after her divorce. 2-pound tin of fresh chocolates and assorted candies. $1.29. Hillman's Fancy Supra Ducks. No finer, more tender duckling to be had. And here's another thing you don't see in stores too often anymore. Shoulder roast mutton.
So I just finished the first initial pass of sanding sealer on the body, and I wanted to really quick show you a couple other guitars I was working on, both a Strat and Jaguar style, both in alder. But that sanding sealer, it really gets sucked up on the raw wood, especially on alder, but even on ash. So what I usually do is the first few coats, I'll spray an initial single pass and then let it sit for a few minutes and then spray a second pass. But I still consider it a single coat. And what you do with sanding sealer is basically, you spray a coat or two, you sand it back. Usually you're going to break through down to the raw wood. You spray another coat or two, you sand it back. And you just keep doing that until you get a really nice, thin, full coverage over the entire body and there's no exposed raw wood underneath. So here I'm getting ready to spray the second coat of sanding sealer, and you can see the conditions are almost perfect. Lower 70s, very low humidity. That's the kind of weather that we like for spraying lacquer. Now I'm going through the same process here. Every time I reload the gun and start spraying another set of bodies, I readjust the spray pattern. So I'm going to explain a little bit of what I'm doing here. I approach this a bit differently than most painters do. I have an HVLP turbine system, so I cannot adjust the PSI. I can't adjust the airflow, basically. So in a traditional system with a compressed air tank and, filters and a spray gun, you can adjust and regulate how much air, how much PSI you have. I can't do that with this. It's constant. So what I do is I actually adjust the spray pattern and the fluid needle to the maximum amount that I want to spray for that particular pass. So I only will lock it in to the maximum amount of fluid that I want to come out, and I will adjust the pattern so I get a nice, good, even coverage. So when I spray on the cardboard, what you're seeing is me kind of getting that dialed in, and then I spray an alder test board, and actually it's alder to match most of the bodies. This body's ash, but most of the guitars I spray are alder. And basically, that is to get a reference point. How is the lacquer settling? Is the spray good? Do I have pitting? Is there a problem? Is there contamination? And it also helps me alleviate any problems I might have before I actually spray it onto the piece and cause a whole bunch of headaches by having to sand it out or whatever. But it also gives me a reference point to how much lacquer I've sprayed, and as I spray color coats, how it's going to actually look on the guitar. So it provides a really, really accurate kind of test condition to what's going to go on the guitar. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of extra cost, but I'd rather make sure that I'm getting it ready and prepared accurately on scrap before I have a very, very costly and time-consuming mistake that I have to repair on the guitar itself. So here I'm just doing another initial pass on the second coat. I'm going to do the same thing here, where I'm going to basically spray 3 bodies at once, and then once they're sprayed with one pass, I go back and spray it with a second pass, and I consider that the second coat. So if you clicked on this video, you probably already have a good idea of what I'm building here. But yes, I am building a Jazzmaster style guitar, although I can't really use the word Jazzmaster, and offset has also been trademarked. So I got to come up with my own name. Well, I suppose the body style is asymmetrical, but there are other asymmetrical body styles, like a short scale version, but this is a full 25.5-inch scale. So I suppose I will call this model my asymmetrical long scale, or ALS model for short. I'm pretty sure that term hasn't been used for anything else and won't be offensive to anyone. So the Jazzmaster, the asymmetrical long scale model that I'm building here is actually going to be a late iteration of the model. Now, some of you watching might be Jazzmaster freaks, Jazzmaster aficionados, or a buff on Fender guitar history, but I know some of you might not know as much on the Jazzmaster, or might be just offset curious, or some of you probably don't even know anything about guitars at all, and you just, for some reason, want to watch a guy build one. So I want to bring you up to date on the Jazzmaster model with a very, very brief history. So if you already know everything about the guitar, please feel free to point out all the omissions and inaccuracies in the comments below. Fender first introduced the Jazzmaster in 1958, and outside of some rare early production models and prototypes, this was the first model to feature a two-piece maple neck with a slab rosewood fingerboard. It also was the first guitar to feature a three-tone sunburst finish. Now, the very first iterations of this model featured a gold anodized metal pickguard, but by early 1959 they switched over to a 4-ply faux tortoiseshell guard, which became standard on this model. Now, when it was introduced, it was the top-of-the-line guitar for Fender, and very appropriately, the Cadillac of the line. It had a lot of first features for the guitars, you know, newly designed body and headstock shape, new vibrato, new pickups, new electronics, etc. So I won't go into all those details here on this video, but at the time, this was really a high-end guitar. It was the top-of-the-line Fender. Now, this body style was joined by the introduction of the Jazz bass in 1960, and then the Oddball Bass 6 in 61, and its short-scale counterpart, the Jaguar, in 62. By the early 1960s, custom colors became popular on Fenders, and the Jazzmaster received the custom color treatment much more than the Stratocaster and Telecaster counterparts. In fact, very often, any custom color finished Jazzmaster would also receive a matching peghead with the same color. All right, so this is the third round of sanding sealer. Basically did 2 thin double coats, which really is kind of 1 coat. And it was 1 part sanding sealer to 3 parts thinner. And so I was doing them in 24-ounce batches. So I did 6 ounces of sanding sealer and then 18 ounces of thinner. Before I was spraying it 2 to 1, and that's what I'm gonna do because I want a slightly thicker build right now to make sure that ash body with all the pores are clear and to get a nice even coverage. So we're gonna do same amount, 24 ounces total, but we're gonna do 8 ounces of the sanding sealer. 8 ounces sanding sealer to, what would that be? I'm not thinking very well right now. Is it 16? Why can't I think right now? I've got fume brain. So yeah, 8, so yeah, 16. So 16 thinner, roughly 8 ounces of sanding sealer. Do a little bit over, a little more, 9 ounces. There's a little bit in there already. And I think I need a new thing of lacquer thinner. And these have new tops on them. Alright, good. I don't have to do shit. So we want to get this to 24. I gotta get my hole. Where's my... There it is. There's my hole one. I sprayed that everywhere. This is just thinner. I had it sitting in the gun. Alright, now I get my mask on. In mid-62, the slab rosewood fingerboards were changed to a thinner curved veneer style on all Fender models, and by the beginning of 65, the clay dots were changed over to pearloid dots. In very early 65, the CBS Corporation bought out Fender and began implementing a rapid-fire succession of changes to all their models. Sometime in early 65, the Jazzmaster knobs were changed to the witch hat style, and in late 65, the neck received white binding to dress it up a bit. By the very end of 65 into early 66, all Fender models received a larger shaped headstock, which is dubbed the CBS style shape. Also in early to mid 66, the Jazzmaster received block pearloid inlays. This was not only applied to the Jazzmaster, but all the high-end offset models, and it's believed that they were trying to go after the upscale Gibson look, mainly the high-end ES355. In late 66 into 67, tuners were changed from Clouson style to the new F-branded tuners, and also the logo changed from the earlier style to the bold CBS letters. But by the end of the decade, the Jazzmaster had really fallen out of favor. Thanks to particularly one player, the Stratocaster was really the model of choice for many guitar players. By 1970, the Jazzmaster had really fallen off in production, probably due to the reemergence of the Stratocaster and even the Telecaster as the most popular models in the lineup. By this time, custom colors had become increasingly rare, and Fender had pretty much stopped the practice of matching the peghead. By 1974, custom colors were discontinued completely for the Jazzmaster, as well as left-handed models, signals that they really weren't that popular. In 1973 or about, Fender started changing over all of their guitars to Ashwood. Now, the Jazzmaster, like many of the models, had been made with alder. Alder had become increasingly inconsistent throughout the 1960s. So I think by the mid-70s, Fender was using ash predominantly as their bodywood of choice. Now, I have seen Jazzmasters and other guitars into the late 70s that appear to be alder, but the 70s, primarily ash was used. The Jazzmaster was no exception. Now, in 1975, its short scale counterpart, the Jaguar, was discontinued. And in late 75 into 76, the Fender Jazzmaster also received the black pickguard treatment, along with all the other models in the line. What you are witnessing here is my arch nemesis. I'm always afraid of debris getting caught in the finish, but especially little flying insects. They are sexually attracted to lacquer fumes. Don't remove it like how I am. I am not doing it the way you should do it. But I know this is going to get sanded out and painted over anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. Now this is where things get really scarce. Jazzmasters from the 70s are very, very difficult to find, but especially after 1975. Once we get into the black pickguard era, the production seems to drop off very, very precipitously. It drops off a lot. In fact, if you go online anytime looking to buy a vintage Jazzmaster, It's probably more common to find a minty early gold guard example than it is a late 70s blackguard example. Now these guitars do exist, but blackguard or late 70s era Jazzmasters are few and far between. It seems that at some point they may have ditched the witch hat knobs in favor of the Strat style knobs again, and many of the very last Jazzmasters have 78 and 79 serial numbers. So now you are up to date with the evolution of the Jazzmaster model. The very, very last ones were made with ash bodies, blocked and bound necks, and larger CBS style headstocks. Normally when someone builds a Jazzmaster style guitar, they're deviating from the vintage setup, or if they are making a vintage accurate recreation, it's almost always an early version of the model with the slab rosewood board and the smaller headstock shape. So now you can see why I had to have these parts custom made. To match the specifications of a late era Jazzmaster, they're just not available already on the current market. So a little recap here for today, Saturday, October 19th. Got about 4 hours behind schedule. Had another client project that went completely bonkers, and that took up a lot of my yesterday, this week, and to this morning. So way behind schedule, but what we did do is we at least got sanding sealer. So 4 passes total. The first 2 were 3-to-1 thinner to sanding sealer, and then the next 2 were 2-to-1, so a lot thicker. Got a pretty thick coverage of all this here. So I'm gonna let this sit overnight. So hopefully at least, 12 plus hours, and then sand them flat and level, and they should hopefully not break through. The ash is starting to poke through a little bit, the Jazzmaster body, or at least I'm seeing the ridges, and so I wanna see if I can get that flat. And if not, we'll have to figure it out, but I'm pretty sure I can get that flat. So at least I got the wood protected, and that's great. So I just got to clean up everything here. It's getting kind of cold, but it's supposed to be even warmer tomorrow. And Monday, hopefully in the evening, I can spray because it's supposed to get up to like 79 Monday. So let these sit, level sand them tomorrow morning, and hopefully go right to a white surfacer primer to get ready for color. So hopefully white and at least a color coat, and then tomorrow, and then be able to do clear coats after that. So time to clean up and get back at it tomorrow. Well, if you're watching this right now, then I obviously didn't finish this guitar, or even this video for that matter, by Halloween. I'm a little bit late, but that's okay. This guitar is, like I mentioned, only inadvertently Halloween themed. It's really appropriate for any time of the year. But with my career and my social calendar and the cooking and the cleaning and the glazing and dating multiple international supermodels, I'm just finding it very difficult to find the time to build these guitars and edit these videos. However, I am working very, very hard every day at consuming as many pumpkin spice products as I can before they yank them all off the shelves. Pumpkin spice chai tea, delicious. So as I'm recording this, last night was Halloween, and we actually had a pretty decent turnout. I only bought 1 bag of candy this time, and I had about maybe 12 trick-or-treaters, which is a pretty good turnout for my neighborhood. And the candy assortment that I bought this year is stuff that I really don't care for, though there is 1 Snickers bar left. I'll have to check that for a razor blade. However, I'm not a huge fan of Skittles or Starburst, so I know I won't be eating all this leftover candy. Now, who am I kidding? But this project has gotten so monumental that I think I'm going to have to break it up into several parts. In fact, in this video, I didn't even get to the tie-in with Halloween. But hint, it has something to do with the color of the Starburst. It's orange, by the way. So in the next video, we're going to get into some really, really fun parts, like spraying the color coats. And also, we're going to take another deep dive into guitar history. This time looking at a very interesting, albeit brief and kind of esoteric period in Fender's guitar history. And it's going to help explain the whole concept behind this build. So I hope that you'll join me for part 2 of this guitar fantasy fiction, 1981 asymmetrical long scale international color build. And I know if you do join me for next time, you are probably a big guitar nerd.